Good morning, I'm Roland Martin. Next on News 1 Now, the Florida and Ohio primaries just a few days away. Both Democratic candidates go at it last night in a debate in Miami. Tonight, Republicans, they will have their debate. We'll recap what Sanders and Clinton said last night. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez breaks down the truth about U.S. job growth and the economy. Also, self-affirmation, self-esteem. We're talking about that when it comes to the issue of body images, this Ebony magazine cover right here, but also the continuing discussion about colorism related to the Nina Simone movie starring Zoe Saldana. What is going on with sisters about body and also color? Also, folks are in the house. Lisa Ray McCoy, Chrisette Michelle, as well as Clifton Powell and others here talking about their stage play, Married But Single. Folks, it's time to bring the funk on News 1 Now and TV 1.
When we began this campaign, I was 3% in the polls. I was probably 60 or 70 points behind the secretary. We have come a long way in 10 months.
So this is a marathon, and it's a marathon that can only be carried out by the kind of inclusive campaign that I'm running.
All right, folks, we had Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders, both of them going at each other last night in a debate in Miami. The crucial Florida primary takes place on Tuesday along with Ohio. The debate last night took place on Univision. It was simulcast on CNN, taking place at the Miami-Dade Community College. A number of issues that were huge. Of course, immigration was a major issue during this debate. And during that debate, Clinton and Sanders attacked Donald Trump first before turning their claws on each other.
Others are also joining in making clear that his rhetoric, his demagoguery, his trafficking in prejudice and paranoia has no place in our political system, especially from somebody running for president who couldn't decide whether or not to disavow the Ku Klux Klan and David Duke.
I think that the American people are never going to elect a president who insults Mexicans, who insults Muslims, who insults women, who insults African Americans. And let us not forget that several years ago, Trump was in the middle of the so-called birther movement, trying to delegitimize the President of the United States of America.
Every child deserves a good teacher in a good school, regardless of the zip code that they live in. Following behind that is health care and how important it is to continue to build on the Affordable Care Act.
African American kids are unemployed or underemployed to the tune of 51%. That's why I co-sponsored legislation to put $5 billion into a jobs program to put our kids to work, because I would rather invest in education than jobs, than jails and incarceration.
My plan for debt-free tuition at public and colleges and universities will eventually eliminate any student debt. But for people who have it, I'm going to put a date certain, that after a certain number of years, you no longer have to pay anything.
What Secretary Clinton just said is absolutely right. I think I said it many months before she said it, but thanks for copying a very good idea.
And a lot of the answers say that, you know, this is going to be much more expensive than anything Senator Sanders is admitting to. This is going to increase the federal government dramatically. And, you know, my dad used to say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
I will stand. Terms of my political career, fighting for workers, fighting for the poorest people in this country. Madam Secretary, I will match my record against yours any day of the week.
Well, let's do that. Let's talk about that.
Senator,
Let's talk about that.
All right, let's break it down with Ralph Chittum, Senior Vice Chairman for the D.C. Republican Party, Yolanda Young, attorney and columnist, Michelle Bernard, political analyst and attorney for the CEO of the Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, and Shermichael Singleton, a Republican consultant. Folks, early on, we heard from folks saying there were too few Democratic debates. The Democratic National Committee was trying to control that. Well, that's all changed because pretty much the candidates said, forget the party, let's go right to the networks. And so you see more of these debates. And I saw folks complaining last night saying, okay, I have debate fatigue. But the reality is, you look at that debate last night, you heard far more policy in the debate last night between Sanders and Clinton than you probably can get in 5 Republican debates combined.
Absolutely.
That's true.
And they forced them to answer the question. You know, if they got the regular political answer, particularly with Secretary Clinton, you know, the host would go back and say, okay, back to the question. What I asked you was, yada, yada, yada. Give me an answer. I liked it.
It was a very good debate, Roland, and I think, you know, comparing it to the Republican debates, as you've seen, Donald Trump has clearly changed the entire dynamics of presidential politics. I mean, he truly is a representation of a political phenomenon. One thing that I was looking forward to in the debate, and Secretary Clinton did bring this up with Senator Sanders, you have all of these programs about free college, free et cetera. How do you pay for this? And I think as Senator Sanders continues to do well, the scrutiny on how you pay for his programs will continue to increase.
One thing that struck me about this debate is Jorge Ramos and the moderators from Univision, they really showed black Democrats how they should go after President Obama and the other Democrats with a black agenda, because they hammered them on immigration issues for almost the first hour and then got concessions from Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders that they're going to ignore U.S. immigration laws and let any child in the country illegally stay. So they really hammered the point.
But this is not a question to me of Univision. But the problem is who was a network hosting.
Yes.
See, that's the key.
Right.
Univision was hosting last night's debate.
Right, but
last
they hammered it.
Right, no. But my point is, you can't have these so-called black caucus debates taking place with Democratic candidates, but it's being done by NBC or somebody else.
Yes.
Unless you have black folks with black networks who do this every day.
We're going to hammer the issue.
Right, but also who know the issues. I mean, that's the difference. And I think that's why it was a difference there.
Yeah.
So, Roland, are you ready?
I've been ready. No, but again, my point is that's the difference. I keep trying to explain to people with all of these debates, the key is the people asking the questions.
Yeah.
You're not going to get questions about education unless you have people who have kids who are in public school. When most of these people who ask these questions, the kids go to private school.
Well, when you do host, you know, the debate that is going to focus on black African American issues, what I would like to begin to see is a discussion when we talk about immigration that does not focus purely on Latin Americans in the country. I mean, immigration is just not a Latino issue.
First of all, 10% of the people
from all over the world.
10% of the black folks in the country right now are not African American.
Yeah. Right.
And so you're absolutely right. Immigration does affect folks who are coming from Bermuda, who are coming from Caribbean or West Indies, coming from African nations as well.
Exactly.
Also, I think what jumped out last night to me, again, you are seeing you're seeing the difference between two candidates, where you have Sanders, who talks about a political revolution, who's talking about gathering millions of people to change a system, whereas Clinton is saying, okay, that's great, but I'm accepting the reality of what we have. She's more of a technocrat. He's more talking about revolution. And so the revolution part gets folks excited. But what she's saying is, okay, tell me how you do that if you still have Republicans controlling the House and the Senate.
And two key examples were the auto bailout and the immigration bill that in 2008 that Bernie Sanders would not support. And he revealed himself to be quite naive on both those issues, because as Clinton pointed out, had they had that DREAM Act and stated, the immigration issue would be further along. And Bernie Sanders, you know, went on talking about, you know, well, I don't believe in slave labor, and he revealed himself to be very naive, because the truth of the matter is, when immigrants come to this country, and some African Americans, they do jobs that no one else is willing to do. So let them make that choice.
And look,
the choice is that or nothing.
And here's the deal. I understand the point that he makes when he said, look, I supported the auto bailout, but I wasn't going to support this when it comes to Wall Street. But the reality is, that's what you get in
Exactly.
D.C., where when you're having to vote on bills,
Yes.
there's going to be a
It's a vote
compromise
choice.
there.
Exactly.
And so you're not going to get everything you want in a particular bill. And so actually on both of those, they're both right. But at the end of the day, the vote that you took, what the ramifications of that particular
Exactly.
vote, if let's say if it didn't pass. And so I totally understand that. I want to go here. Shelley, please go to my iPad. This is the lead story today on Politico.com. Supreme Court. So let's see here. We got some issues here. So let me see if I can plug it back in here. Supreme Court, I'll just read it. Supreme Court, Trump engulf Capitol Hill. They're talking about what's happening with the Supreme Court. And the thing that jumps out at me is, and I keep saying this, first of all, the story says that by next week, the president likely will appoint a nominee. I don't understand what's taking so long because the window is shrinking when the Senate goes on recess, summer recess in July. I still contend that the president, the smart play is for this president to appoint a black woman, first of all, who's going to be eminently qualified, no doubt. But that puts the Republicans in a no-win situation to have them say, I won't even meet with this woman.
Yes.
To me, there's nobody else the president can appoint that is going to have sort of that visceral reaction, set up largely white senators. Then you're going to have those white females in the Senate, Kelly Ayotte, others who are saying, oh, I'm not even going to meet with her. Forget a confirmation or a vote, even meet with her. To me, that's the last thing of your Republicans you want to see.
Strategically, Roland, that makes all the sense in the world. And again, it plays into that narrative that Republicans cannot relate. It plays into that narrative that Republicans are bigoted or racist or whatever the perceptions may be by people of color, communities of color. And so if I was the president or if I was advising the president, I would indeed say appoint an African-American woman and allow these folks to say we won't meet with her. And so when we get to the general, we're going to play this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Strategically, that makes perfect sense.
Ralph?
No, politically, it would be a brilliant move by President Obama. But then I go back to the statement I made earlier. Where is the black community out here, the drum that you keep beating, saying to this president, this is what we want you to do. This is what we want you to do.
Quiet.
The same way Jorge Ramos
Quiet.
and the moderators last night hammered them for
Quiet.
50 minutes on illegal immigration.
Well, we're seeing it in social media. We are. I mean, if anything,
who?
Look, when I get on Facebook or
who?
Twitter, from the people.
Here's the deal. The black
Not from you.
Okay, here's the deal.
Not
Last
from-
week, hold up. Last week on Thursday, a group of black preachers had a conference call to push this whole issue of the Supreme Court. On the call was Dr. Barbara Skinner, and I asked her the question. Okay, Barbara, have you and others pressed the president to appoint a black woman? She, for the first time, publicly revealed, which I already knew, but they wouldn't do it publicly, at the Black Women's Roundtable, sent a letter to the press. She's the chair of the Black Women's Roundtable, sent a letter to the president that a meeting with senior advisor Valerie Jarrett on this very issue. Holy hell broke out. All of a sudden, it was like, oh my God, why did she release that information? I asked the question. It was public. I broadcast on my radio show. And all of a sudden, they still won't release the letter. You haven't seen, okay, Cornell Williams Brooks, CEO of the NAACP. He goes to Delta Days and says, need a black woman on the Supreme Court. I've seen no press release. I've texted and called Cornell to come on this show. Nothing. Leadership Conference of Civil Rights. Wade Henderson. I saw him at the White House. Said he wants to come on the show, talk about Supreme Court. We hit him up to come on, declined the invitation. All of these I've heard nothing from Reverend Sharpton, National Action Network. I heard him say, hey, it'd be nice if we have a black woman on the court, but, you know, we need somebody qualified. As if a black woman not going to be qualified. And so they are purposely being quiet, and that to me is absolutely nonsensical.
Well,
you cannot convince
perhaps they
Latinos
agree with
to
me,
be quiet.
Perhaps they agree with me
What?
that while it would be wonderful to have a black woman on the Supreme Court, there are other marginalized groups in this country that could also represent the court, be progressive, and move the court forward.
Well, I mean,
But it's
Hold
not.
up. Who?
There are many people.
Who?
For example,
No. So you telling me that black women who were the drivers of the civil rights movement, black women who birthed the kids in this country, black women who raised the kids that built America, are you telling me that now is not the time for an historic appointment of a black woman to the Supreme Court?
I'm telling you that the time was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, today. Yes, today is the time. But I'm saying to you that the issue is more complicated than that.
No, it's not.
It's
not that complicated.
It's not the time for identity politics.
Hold on. If the court is wait. If the court is not,
there is no if.
Wait a minute. If the court is not time for identity politics, Sonia Sotomayor, the first Supreme Court nominee of the president, was Latino. You don't think Latinos were happy about that? Then you had Elena Kagan.
Of course, we're happy with President Barack Obama. I mean, that's not the issue.
I'm speaking of, again, in an election year where you have senators, Republicans, who are saying we won't even meet with the nominee. There is no other pick you can make politically that will drive your base to the polls, that will also freak Republicans out. And I'm trying to understand, I got two guys who are Republican who get it, but I'm trying to understand how as a black woman who's an attorney, you don't get put in a system on the Supreme Court. Sure, Michael.
This black woman who's the attorney gets it. I'm sorry to butt in, but it's Women's History Month, so I'm going to talk. This black woman gets it. Look, it is the fourth, set aside everything else you said, it is the fourth quarter of President Obama's presidency. If he does not do this and give black women their due, who is going to do it? The same
black women who voted at a higher rate for this president in 08 and 12 than any group in America, higher than white men, white women, Hispanics, Asian, Native Americans. Pick any disenfranchised group you want, but black women voted at a higher rate than anybody else.
Now, they're still voting higher than any other group in the presidential process. Now, we saw that in South Carolina.
Sure, Michael, here's the other piece here, Ilana. This is answer this. If Obama nominates a sister, you now have the opportunity to say, Secretary Clinton, Senator Sanders, if the Republicans block this nominee, and if you win, will you come back and reappoint this woman? So you've now not only have you boxed in Republicans, you boxed in Democrats, and now you're sitting there saying, now what y'all gonna do?
But Republicans
tell me any other pick that will allow you to do that.
But Republicans have no choice, Roland, but to appoint.
Hold on one second. Tell me any other pick that will allow you to do that.
I will concede your point
regarding
political strategy, but that was not my point. My point was that the Supreme Court is a body of 9, and in that body of 9, I feel that the liberal justices on that court do a good job of holding ground on issues that impact African Americans.
Hold up, but who would be better to truly hold that ground than a black woman who's eminently qualified to be the Supreme Court justice?
Well, how well is Justice Clarence Thomas doing?
First of all, who nominated Justice Clarence Thomas?
And the president would not nominate Clarence Thomas. Look, did you see before South Carolina, there were commercials on television of like Trayvon Martin's mother and other mothers who have lost their children. If you put a black woman on the Supreme Court, or at least give her the opportunity to have the Senate turn her down and say, we will not meet with you, here's what you get to say to the women that is going to drive women to the polls in droves. If there is a black woman on the Supreme Court, it is the highest law of the land. When it comes to dealing with what is constitutional and unconstitutional, we will not see a Flint, Michigan again. I would love to see a black woman talking to Clarence Thomas.
Precisely. Michael. One second.
The president of the United States is a black man, and we saw Flint, Michigan.
Sure, Michael.
And there was federal oversight in Flint, Michigan.
Sure, Michael.
For Republicans, I think it would be foolish strategically. It would be a huge miscalculation if he were to appoint an African-American woman for us to not meet with her. Because what you're seeing now, there's a decrease in turnout on the Democratic side, and there's increased turnout on the Republican side. If he were to appoint an African-American woman and we say we're not meeting with her, I am almost certain you would see a huge increase, a huge spike in turnout on the Democratic side. And that would hurt Republicans.
And the Republicans, right now, they can't afford to go back on their word saying no hearing. That's game, set, match. Yeah. But if you want to get cute and appoint somebody else, you now are removing what is a perfect political scenario. So you get two things, political scenario, and if they do meet with her and have a confirmation, she'll get confirmed. And history will be made. And this brother will be the one saying, I was right. Coming up, Labor Secretary Tom Perez talks about jobs here in America. Also, black women embrace their curves, but what's going on with the issue of colorism as well? We'll break that all down right here. News One Now, TV One, 18 after the hour. Back in a moment.